And let's do it right now. All right. Hi, I'm Colin Smith, and welcome to Live from Lockdown. Yes, I finally got around to creating an intro with a new logo. Let me know what you guys think of it, if you like it. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at creating some panoramas, and we're going to do some tiny planets, and of course we're going to jump into everyone's favorite segment, Fix My Photo, and then we're going to kind of hang out and do questions and answers at the end there, and we'll kind of hang out. But meanwhile, just drop in the chat there, let everybody know where you're from. Feel free to chat with everybody. This is Live from Lockdown, which is where we come together during this global pandemic, and we just get away for an hour and have some fun geeking out in Photoshop and just art, photography, things that we enjoy. And so we'll also kind of hang out a little bit at the end. So why don't we get started right now? Even though there may be people kind of coming in as we're going. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with some panoramas. And I'm just going to go into Bridge here just so I can get started. And quite often what I will do is, and people often ask me this too, do I work in Lightroom? Because a lot of the tutorials, particularly when I'm doing Photoshop tutorials, are, I'm just doing it in Photoshop and Camera Raw. Yes, I do. A lot of the time, my normal workflow is I will start off, and I'm just going to bring this mic a little closer, make sure it's nice and loud. A lot of the time, I will start off inside of Lightroom, and then I will move into Photoshop. So for some of these, when we're not working in Lightroom, I'll do the same thing in Bridge and Camera Raw. And by the way, the processing engine inside of Camera Raw is exactly the same as the one in Lightroom. So if I'm doing anything in Camera Raw, you can do it exactly the same way in Lightroom or Lightroom Classic. So just so you know that those are the same. So why don't we start off this week, though? We're going to do something with a panorama. And so I've got a pretty complex panorama here. I got a lot of shots here. There's 16 shots. And so, this is the real deal here. It's not one of those 2-image panoramas, just fake it for the demo. This is an actual shot. And these are all DNG RAW files, except for when they're not. Some of them are JPEGs. But these were shot on a DJI... forgetting the one I used. Actually, sorry, it was the DJI Mavic, the Mavic Pro, of course. The Mavic Pro original one is the only one where you could shoot vertical. Because the camera lens on it will actually rotate, or the sensor will rotate so you can shoot in vertical. Now, if you're shooting panoramas yourself as a photographer, terrestrial-based photographer, or whatever you're using, it's always a good idea to be shooting like that in vertical. Now, it seems like it might make sense, and I've got to change the screen here. Let me get the screen into where you guys can see my screen. Here we go. My apologies with that. All right. Things should be good in a second. Now, someone says audio and video are out of sync. Well, usually you get a little bit of lag here. That's just kind of what happens with the live streams. And also, I think there's some issues right now with some of YouTube's servers here. It seems like there could be some issues. But... hopefully everything's going to go well for this whole live stream. So anyway, shooting vertical is a good way to capture more of up above in the sky and down below in the water. And also it will increase the megapixel count because we need to take more shots to shoot that entire panorama. So it's kind of a good thing in that sense. Some people think, hey, if I go horizontal, I don't need to take as many shots. That's true, but you're not going to capture as much of the sky, the foreground, and also you're not going to get as much dynamic range in there. So we should be good there. All right, so why don't I select all of these? I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to select them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go up under the tools here, and I'm going to choose Photoshop. Now, I've noticed in here, I've actually got duplicates. It looks like I've got 8 shots for this panorama, and half of them are JPEGs, well, there's 8 JPEGs and 8 DNGs, so it doesn't really matter. Photoshop will sort that out for me, or I could just go in and just choose just the DNGs or the JPEGs. Why don't we do that? So I'm just going to hit the Control key here on the JPEGs, just quickly just going away. Actually, why don't we just do the JPEGs, because it will process a little bit faster. So these are the same images, so it looks like I shot in JPEG and DNG. Normally I will shoot only in JPEG. So we'll see, sorry, only in JPEG. Normally I'll shoot only in DNG. Looks like we got some duplicates. You know what, I'm just going to select them all. And we'll just go with them all and let Photoshop sort them out, which it will. Alright, so let's just go into Tools, and we're going to go to Photoshop. And then under Photoshop, we have the option here where we can go to Photomerge. Now, we're in Bridge. You could do exactly the same thing. If you're working in Lightroom, you would just right-click and then just choose Open Photomerge in Photoshop. Now you can merge these inside of Camera Raw, and you can also merge them inside of Lightroom. But that's not what we're going to do today. We're going to do it with Photoshop. So we're going to choose Photomerge. There's no Photomerge built into Bridge. What it's doing is it's actually invoking Photomerge right here inside of Photoshop. So it just launches this control, and that would be the same as under the Automate, and I'll show you that in a minute. We'll do that one as well. Okay, so why don't we just blend these images together? That works well. And why don't we just go with these options for now, just the basic option and order, and we're going to click OK. And let Photoshop do its stuff. Now it's going to take a while, because notice it's loading up the DNGs and the JPEGs, and it's just going to find the ones that work best, and it's going to build out this panorama. So while it's doing it, let me just jump in here and say hi to some people here. Good to see you guys. I see there's a lot of regulars here. I'm glad to see that. We've got Russ. We've got, let me go up to the top here. We've got Tracy. We've got a few of our regulars. Stuart Braithwaite from New Zealand. We've got Tony from California. Tom from Havana, Florida. We've got Jill. Good to see you. We've got Stockholm in the house. JD. We've got Linda from Wellington, New Zealand, capital of New Zealand. Wonderful. All right. So as you can see here, while I've been doing this, Photoshop has worked in the background and it's put all of these together. Now you might see these little cracks here and you're like, oh my gosh, it's cracked. Once we merge these together, I'm just going to hit Control E. Those will disappear. Let me make sure I'm on the right screen now. Select everything, hit Control E, and boom, all those little cracks will disappear. There we go. So we've merged everything together, but it's looking a little bit crooked. So why don't we look at some tools in here for fixing that? And this is part of the reason why I wanted to do this one inside of Photoshop, so we could see it. And let's see if the horizon's even straight. So we're just going to pull down the ruler there. It's actually not bad. The horizon's pretty good, but the whole thing looks a little crooked. And by the way, to do that, just hit Control R, and it would be Command R on Mac, Control R on Windows, and that opens up that little ruler tool there for you. So why don't we go ahead now, and we're going to just fix this inside of Photoshop. So we're going to choose the filter menu, and then under the filter, we're going to go down to adaptive wide angle. Yep, very excitingly named tool here, but it's actually very powerful. And so here we are inside the adaptive wide angle, and you'll see that there's different options in here. So if we click on here, we could go into the different ones, but the one we want to be working on is panorama. Quite often though, you'll find that fisheye will work well too, depending on your panorama that you're working with. Alright, so we've selected panorama, and what we want to do is just scale it down. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to see the whole image. And you can see, yeah, this thing is definitely pretty crooked. Let's grab the hand tool here, and this will enable me to move things over so we can see the whole image. And let's scale it down even more. So we want to look at the whole panorama in here. Alright, there we go. That's our pano. Might even go smaller. There we go. Now we can see our entire image that we're working with. So what we want to do is we want to straighten it. Now there's a little trick here. Some of you might be might be used to this tool here. And if you kind of click on here, what it's going to do is, see how it's warped? Let me undo that again. I'm just going to undo that. As I click, notice how it bends. And what it's going to do is it's going to get rid of the warping of that area to just kind of straighten it up. But there's a little tip I'm going to show you in here with this tool. If you click and drag this out and hold down the Shift key, it works exactly the same, but now it turns yellow. And the thing about this is when it turns yellow, that's going to set that new line to the new horizon line. So that's going to be perfectly horizontal. So let me just release, and you can see there on the left-hand side, that is perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go from the other side. Notice I started on the horizon, and this makes sure that our horizons are level. So I'm going to go back the other way, holding down that Shift key, and I'm going to make sure that I meet at the same place. If I meet up here or down there, it's going to do some strange things. So you want to make sure that both sides are meeting in the middle. That Shift key, remember, turns it yellow, release, and now it's going to straighten up that photo. So this is a nice way to do it. Now, when you're here, you still have some options. Like maybe you want to warp the photo up a little bit. So if you can grab this and you pull it down a little bit, watch this. See, that'll push that part. Well, let's go the other way. You know, if we go that way, see how we can warp that photograph just by simply clicking that area there. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit more. And that's just going to kind of push it up. And I'm going to take the other side, click here, and grab that little box and drag it down to match. And see what we're doing is we're actually forcing it now to warp up if you wanted to add that little bit of warping effect. See how we can do that? So you have that flexibility of saying, you know what, I do want to put just a little bit of warp on it. I don't want it to be perfectly flat, or you can make it perfectly flat. So it's completely up to you. Why don't I bring this back up a little bit and get this a little bit more level? I just wanted to show you those options. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to click OK. And someone was asking, Fred was asking, is there a difference between Photomerge and Lightroom and Photoshop? Yes, they both work quite differently. The Photomerge in Lightroom works the same as the one does in Camera Raw, where it's a very automated process. And we did a panorama a couple of weeks ago in Lightroom Lockdown inside of Camera Raw, so check that out. And right now we're doing it just a different way so we can do this. But what it does inside of Photoshop, when we do it here, it gives us a little bit more control over, you know, it's just a little bit more manual work, so we can kind of change things a little bit. So we want to kind of crop this in a little bit here. Let's crop this in. And then hit enter. And then we can see, you know, we've made a panorama. Now what we want to do, we want to take this into Camera Raw now and just make some adjustments. So we're going to choose Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And this is where we would just adjust this now like we would adjust any other image. And I'll answer those questions in just one sec. I see we've got a few Pano questions there. So what I want to do is increase the color temperature just a little bit and just kind of warm it up. The Mavic Pro, the original Mavic Pro, tended to shoot things a little bit cool sometimes. The Mavic Pro 2 has just the color on it is so much better than the original. Okay, so I'm going to pull the highlights back and let's open up the shadows just a little bit. So what we're doing is extending the dynamic range. Let's pull the contrast back a little bit. And maybe I've gone too far with that. It's looking pretty good. Now, you can also go here and then find an area of gray if you wanted to set your white balance that way. And I just clicked on an area that was gray. If you have another area that, you know, be a neutral white or gray, you could click on there. Let's see if I try the surf. I don't know if that'll work, but well, it's not bad. So you can do it that way. Okay, let's just give it a little punch with the whites, a little punch with the blacks. Let's give it a lot of texture. Let's reduce the contrast again. And you can see, you know, we can kind of go in and just kind of make these adjustments here. Maybe I want to warm that up a bit more. And you can kind of see, you know, that's how we're putting together a panorama. And then at this point, you would just click OK, bring it into Photoshop. And then if you wanted to do any more changes in there, you could. Okay, let's have a look here. Some people have got some questions about the panoramas. When taking images, is it best to stay in one spot or move along the scene? Tony, you want to stay in one spot when you're shooting a panorama. And let me just go to camera here, but I'm going to grab a camera. And I want to show you guys something about working with a panorama. So when you're shooting a panorama, the natural inclination is to rotate it like this on this part, where it's on the tripod. See what I'm doing there? Or to go like this. I see some people, they shoot the panoramas like this. What you want to do is you want to rotate it on the nodal point. And the nodal point is the point of no parallax on the camera. Usually it's towards the back of a lens. Let me do this with me for a second. Put your hand out in front of your face like this, and then close one eye, and then look at the background. See it where it lines up against your wall somewhere, or if you're facing the wall, look away. Now change it and go to the other eye. When you do that, you notice it's moved, and that's called parallax. And when you have objects close to you and you're shooting with panoramas and you get that parallax, you're going to find objects that are going to disappear, or you're going to see doubling of the objects. And that happens when you rotate like this, or you rotate from there. So what you want to do is find that point of no parallax, which is about there, and then look through your lens and rotate the camera there. If that doesn't work, go forward a little bit, or come back, and then just find it. And eventually you'll find a point on your camera where you are rotating and you're not seeing that parallax anymore because you're rotating it on the nodal point. And when you do that, if it's a lens you use a lot for panoramas, put a little tape on it or mark it so you know that's your point of no parallax. Now, if you're really serious into panorama photography, then you can get a panoramic head. And a panoramic head enables you, rather than just mounting it here, it goes backwards and forwards and enables you to mount it on the no parallax point. So you can rotate it there. Nodal Ninja's a good one. Manfrotto makes one. I have a Manfrotto myself. And those work quite well for that. Let's have a look here. Could we also zoom out bottom left corner rather than start? Yeah, absolutely you could do that. The adaptive is not new. Nope. Is the top tool just straightening, or is it for removing the warp fisheye? You can fix the warp Photomaker. You can fix that warp fisheye effect by using the adaptive wide angle. It works on that as well. Why not use one horizon line? Because it just doesn't seem to work as well if I try to drag it across the whole photo. And then the other thing is the horizons sometimes get crooked like this. So by going across one side and then going across the other side, I'm able to match those horizons and get them so they're level, so it doesn't look like this, because that can happen quite often. How do you get the photos to use an adaptive wide angle? So when there will be a replay of this, just so you guys know, and I'm going to do another panorama right now. What do I think about Sony using camera panorama mode? I think they're great. I have a Sony as well. So they can do it and they can stitch it in camera. Yeah, it works quite well. But sometimes if you want to do something like an HDR panorama, where you're doing an HDR and a panorama together, you get more control doing it manually. So yeah, it just really depends. How do you do that with a drone? Well, with the drone, you just hover the drone in the air, and essentially what you do is you find a spot where you want to compose the shot. So you might slide the drone from side to side rather than rotating it. Slide it until you find the center of your frame. So you're just going to be just flying out like that. And then when you find it, then what you want to do is you just rotate, or take a shot, a little more, take another shot, and then just keep going across. For regular photos, you want about a 30% overlap. If you're doing it with a drone, you want to get about a 50% overlap, because the drone has more of a wide angle and more of a fisheye effect. It will cause more distortion. As you get more shots and more overlap, it will reduce the distortion in the overall picture and give you a much cleaner picture. So that's kind of how we do that there. using earlier versions of Photoshop, how do you access raw adjustment without the raw filter option? You just go into Bridge and then right click and say Open in Camera Raw. So that's how you would do that. In fact, why don't I show you here? So if you wanted to open these in Camera Raw and you're in an earlier version, Photoshop 6, because it didn't come in until Photoshop CC, you're going to right click and then just choose Open in Camera Raw. So that's how you would do that. All right, great. So why don't we go ahead and we're going to do another one, and this time we're going to do something different with it. We're going to turn it into a tiny planet. And tiny planets are a lot of fun. And let me just see there. Yeah, and Linus says he often uses his iPhone 11 in pano mode. Yeah, that works great. PS hints for working on that. Well, you could use Lightroom Mobile for processing it. Would look quite nice. And then if you bring it in, but usually the iPhone does a pretty good job. And if it doesn't, I believe there's some apps you can get where you can choose to shoot the panorama but also shoot individual photos. So try that as well as another option. Okay, so why don't we put this one together? So this is a simple panorama. It's just 5 images. This was also shot from a drone. This was a Phantom 4 Pro, and this was in Hawaii. Any of you guys there from Hawaii, big shout out. Aloha. And I cannot wait to get back to the islands when they're back open and everything is safe. So we're going to right click here, and then we're just going to do the same thing. Actually, we're going to go up under photo here. If you were doing it inside of Camera Raw, you would right click. But here we go under Tools, and then we go under Photoshop, and then we're just going to load these into Photomerge. And we're going to bring them in here. Now, I'm just going to make you aware of some new options here that have been added. And vignette removal, we'll try to get rid of it. That's not new. Geometric distortion correction, you could turn that on and it can attempt to fix that. But the other one that's kind of interesting is content aware fill transparent areas. So you know where those transparent areas are around the edge there, you can turn on content aware fill and it's going to attempt to do that. So I'm not sure how well it's going to work. Why don't we find out together? So I'm just going to do a basic photo merge first. Let's just click here. And then we'll do it again and we'll see if the content aware fill works very well. Because I haven't really tested it out. See, this one's all over the place. So this one's going to need some help. But what if we go back here? I'm curious. I'm not holding out a lot of faith for doing this with a raw file. So let's see how it works. What do you guys think? So let's go here to Photoshop. And we're going to choose Photomerge. Just the same as we did before. Yes. And this time we're going to try Content Aware Fill Transparent Areas. So these are these transparent areas here. So it's going to use Content Aware Fill in there. Let's see if it works any good or not. This is a tough one because these are kind of all over the place. They're not very even, but let's see how it does. Content aware fill. Look at that. That worked really well. Okay, color me impressed. Good job, Photoshop. All right. So that content aware fill, look at that. Wow, I'm really impressed how well that did. So that got rid of those edges, because when you shoot those photos, you get those little edges of that hemispherical kind of thing. And here, by using content aware fill, boom, we don't have to crop this photo. We can use the whole frame on there. So, wow, they've really done a good job of that. All right, so why don't we go in and we're going to go back to our adaptive wide angle. So we're going to choose our adaptive wide angle because we still need to get rid of the distortion on this. See how that thing is really distorted badly. So this is what would happen. Someone asked, why don't I just do it in one go? Because it just won't. On narrower ones you can, but see on there that just runs out of gas. So why don't we go to about here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and that's going to pop that, straighten up that side. Let's grab right on the horizon line on the other side. Go there, hold down the Shift key, and see how it's nicely going to fix that. And we're going to click OK. All right. So now we've done that. Notice we've got a little more distortion because we bent that to try and fix it. So we just need to fill those edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of all those. We don't need those back ones there. Why don't I just delete those? It's nice that the working images are there in case we do need them. Let me get rid of all of those. So what we want to do is fill these little gaps. So Control-click on the thumbnail So by control click, we're loading in the selection. So this is everything that has pixels on it. So we want to fill in these little gaps here. So what we want to do though is we're going to inverse our selection. So we're going to choose select, and then under the select option we can go down and we can choose to invert our selection or inverse here. And you can see the keyboard shortcut there is Shift Command I, and that would be Shift Control I on Windows. And then we're just going to click there, and now we're selecting those areas. Now if we go to fill those right now, there's going to be a seam because it's right there. So we want to just kind of overlap it a little bit. And so the way we do that is we're going to expand our selection. So all the tools to do with selections are under the select menu. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose to modify the selection, and I'm going to expand the selection a little bit. We'll do 5 pixels. Click OK. So hey, Dave Cross is in the house. Good to see you, Dave. Dave Cross, good friend of mine, great Photoshop instructor. I'm sure a lot of you guys know Dave or know of Dave. So say hi to him from sunny Florida. All right, so now that we've made the selection, we want to fill it, and we want to fill it with content aware fill. So let's hit our Shift Delete, and that's going to bring up the fill dialog box. Now under the top, we want to choose content aware. With content aware selected, by the way, there's an option that was added a few versions ago, color adaptation. Unless you have a reason not to use it, just leave it on. But what it really does work very well is in gradients and areas of solid color, it blends them much better. So we're just going to click OK here, and we'll let content aware do its thing. Control D to turn that off. And there we go. And we've now got nice clean edges all the way around. So now we're going to go like a little bit crazy with this. So we've kind of created a panorama. You know, we could adjust it. Why don't we do a quick adjustment here? And we're going to use our camera raw filter. And why don't we just do our basic adjustments that I always do. So we're going to recover our highlights a little bit, which always brings out the clouds nicely in the sky. Pop the shadows, but not too much. If you go too much, it looks too artificial. So take it just a little bit, and then the rest of the way I might just give it a boost of exposure. And now we want to make sure we just clean up these areas. See how there's a gap on the left and a bit of a gap on the right? That means we don't have good shadows. So I'm just going to take the blacks and just pull that across to the left. And I'm even watching the histogram until it touches that edge there. See what I'm doing? And that will work pretty well for that. And now we want to do the same thing with the highlights. There's a little bit of a gap there. And by the way, if you hold down the Alt or the Option key, you can also see clipping. So if I'm pushing this, as I hold down the Option key, I can see that clipping. That's another way you can do it. But sometimes in this case, I'm just going to eyeball it, and I'm just watching it because I have a properly calibrated monitor. So if you are working with a calibrated monitor, you can eyeball it. If you're not using a color calibrated monitor, don't eyeball it because you don't really know what you're looking at. And maybe some other time, let me know if you guys are interested in doing something with color management, but maybe we can look at that as a future tutorial. So, all right, so there we go. So we've kind of given that a little bit of a punch. I'm going to increase the temperature a little bit just to warm it up, and click OK. And there we go. We've made this panorama. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our little tiny planet effect just for fun. So you guys fasten your seatbelts. There's not too many steps. It's pretty easy. So first thing we need to do is we need to turn this into a square. So we're going to go under the image and we're going to choose the image size. And in order to get it to a square, what we need to do is we need to turn off the chain link. Make sure that's off. Otherwise it'll constrain. If I change one, both of them will change. By turning it off, I can change them individually. And because I'm just doing it for the screen, I'll drop the top down to 1600 and I'll make the width 1600. So there we go. So we're doing a 16 by 1600. Click OK, and there we go. We've got this really weird looking square. Now, if you want it to fold in on itself where all the buildings are kind of coming in, which is a cool effect, like a reverse tiny planet, maybe you call it a tiny vortex or something, just keep it as it is. If you want to create the tiny planet, you need to flip this. So let's choose the Control T for free transform, and that would be Command T on Mac, right click, and then we're going to choose vertical. I know you could go up under the image, adjust rotate or whatever it is, but I don't use those menus. It takes too long. And if we do it this way, it's just much quicker. All right, you guys tracking? So here we go. Now we're going to make our tiny planet. So we're going to choose Filter. And then we're going to go to our Distort menu. And under our Distort menu, we have the option to do polar coordinates. Now, did you ever wonder what polar coordinates were? Did you think it was something that, turns on the air conditioning, makes things cooler? No. Let's turn it on here. And then if we click OK, boom, we get our tiny planet, Control T, and we can rotate this around. And boom, there we go. And of course, we can go in here and we can fix that seam, just using content aware fill or, however we want to do it. We can use a healing brush. Oh, there's lots and lots of ways of doing that. So anyway, that's just a basic tiny planet there. And looks like people want to see color management. Ring world, right? All right, we've got quite a few of our regulars here. So why don't we just have a look here at fixing this. So if I just go in here and I just quickly grab this. I have no idea. This is what I love about these live streams. You have no idea what's going to happen. And I just hit the Shift Delete and choose Content Aware. Let's see how well that does. That's not bad. Look at that. It's pretty good. And then I could probably go in here and do the same thing. So I'm just making a selection. I might be a little hopeful with this one, but let's see where we go. Content Aware. Yep, worked well. And then you could go with the clone stamp tool and you could kind of make these line up. And sometimes what I might do is cut pieces from the other part of the clouds here and then just maybe put them over the top, Control J if you want to just kind of line them up a little bit. Let me tell you what I did there. Was I made this selection, Control J copies that to a new layer. Control T will select our marquee tool here. This is our free transform tool. And then I can just kind of move it around and I can, just kind of use this for patching. So one of the things I'll do a lot when I'm retouching is I'll just do kind of patchwork kind of stuff like this. I'm not going to make this one perfect, but I'll just turn on a layer mask, grab a brush, and maybe we'll work with a black brush. Make sure opacity is set to 100%. Painting on here. And you want to have a really large brush that's really soft. Make sure your hardness is all the way down. And, and then you could just kind of start to blend it in, like I'm not trying to make this perfect, but see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of blending that. And then you can start to blend different areas, and then you're not going to get the overlap. You can kind of customize a little bit how you want to just kind of patch that. So that's one of the things, a lot of people don't do in retouching. You try to do everything sometimes with a healing brush, or you try to do everything, with the content aware fill. And a really, really effective way of doing it is just patching, just taking pieces of the photo and then just moving them into the troubled areas and then just kind of blending them in. And then, of course, you can refine them with content aware, clone stamp, healing brush, things like that. So any questions on that, let me know. It looks like we've got some here. Kathy would like color management. So we've got 3 people would like the color management. Great. All right, guys. So this is essentially the tutorials here. And now we're going to go into a brand new Fix My Photo. All right, and here we are, and time for Fix My Photo. And as you can see on the screen there, this is how you can submit your photos, because we're actually going to be working on your guys' photos right now. So this is not my photos anymore. These are your photos. And you can submit them by putting them to fearlesscafe.com. I finally set up a domain name for it, so rather than having that difficult place to find it, you can just upload there, and it'll take you to a Dropbox link where you can upload your RAW files, which are preferred, or you can do a JPEG. Make sure it's at least 2,000 pixels across. I prefer if it's unedited, because if it's edited, it's hard for me to do anything to it. And then, of course, we can, put your name in the file name so we know whose photos they are, and also a maximum of 3 submissions. So thanks, guys. I'm glad you guys liked my little transition there. So yes, I've been working hard this week on some overlays and transitions and stuff, and trying to, just up our production value just one little bit at a time. So why don't we jump in right now, and we're going to go back into our photos. And so we've got a number of photos that have been submitted by you guys, and I would love you to submit them, so do that now if you want, or afterwards just make a note so you can upload some and we can maybe look at your photos next week. But all these photos were submitted by you guys. So these are your photos that we're going to be working on. And do me a favor before we jump in and start working on this. If you guys are liking this, hit that like button right now. What it does is it helps the algorithm because while we're live right now, it will send out, we'll boost it a little bit and get more people aware of the fact that we're having this live stream. And also, and that's the thumbs up for Ralph Nelson. And also, if you guys have not subscribed to the YouTube channel here, you'll see a subscribe button there on the screen. Just push that button and turn on the notifications. And that will also let you know when we're doing these live streams. Because I don't want to rely on, trying to send out social media or newsletters to let you guys know. So if you do subscribe, turn those notifications on. When I do these live streams, you'll know. And also I want to do from time to time some impromptu ones where we're just going to do them randomly, and if you're subscribed and you have those notifications, then you'll know I'm doing them. Otherwise, you'll probably miss them. So anyway, guys, let's go have a look at some different things here. Scrolling through some lovely photos that have been submitted. And by the way, you guys take wonderful photos. And thanks for sharing them. So why don't we start here? Rod Shelley has a photo here. Why don't we double click on it, and we're going to open this. It's a raw file, shooting Canon by the looks of it. And here we are, and it opens it up into Camera Raw. So this is a great photo, and he's dealing with, one of those things that we deal with a lot, and that's backlighting. When you're shooting during the day, you don't always have the opportunity to make sure everything's perfectly lit. You might not have a flash on you that you can just pop that on the foreground to lighten it up. However, that's how you would do it in camera. But you get this a lot when you're on vacation too. When you go to landmarks, you're just passing through. You're not going to have your whole family wait until sunset. You're like, oh no, the light's not right now. Could you guys just hang out for another 4.5 hours and the light's going to be perfect? I'm sure you can amuse yourselves in the rental car. Yeah, that you're not going to be very popular, and people will stop inviting you on trips if that's who you are. That's why no one invites me on trips anymore. So anyway, so you get this light in the area behind you. It could be the Hollywood sign, or a recent example for me was Makapu Island, where it's lit. And generally, the sun is hitting those areas. They're very bright. And then you could be standing in an area which might be in shade. Maybe the mountain or the hill on the side there's casting a shadow on you. Very common scenario. And you can't really stand anywhere else. You can't get in the light sometimes. So you can't even that lighting out. And then you're going to end up with a bright background and a dull foreground. Now, Rod Shelley did the right thing. He exposed for the background for the brighter area. And that's smart, because when you get those bright areas, it's easier to recover details here into these shadow areas than if he'd exposed for this and blown out the sky to a pure white. Then the only opportunity, or the only option we would have after that, would be to do a complete sky replacement. But because he exposed for the clouds in the background, we can just brighten up this foreground area, and we're going to be good. So good job there on that. So why don't we have a look? First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to recover my highlights here, because I like to make these clouds dramatic. Now there's another tool here that works really, really well for clouds, and that's the clarity. Not the clarity, the dehaze, sorry. So I'm going to hit the dehaze. Now this was designed originally to cut through glare and haze and things like that, but it just works so well on clouds. Look at that. It's just brought in the drama. Let's play around with the color temperature. We can make it warmer. We can make it cooler. A lot of different things we could do here. Let me know. What do you guys think? Do you like the cooler color, or do you guys like the warmer color? There's the warmer color. There's a cooler color. Let me know in the comments. And what I'm going to do is we'll come back at the end and we'll fix that according to what you guys like the best. So what we want to do now is we want to brighten up this area. So we can go in here. Now there's a couple of ways we could do this. You could just push the shadows, and let me show you. by increasing the shadows, look at this, you can actually pull out a lot of detail. There we go. And now we can actually see, hey, this is a carving, and it's a very cool carving. So this is one way of doing it, just opening up the shadows, and that's a way I'll use a lot. Notice I pushed the highlight and shadow recovery all the way up. And that works out pretty good because, you know, we don't have to do a lot more work on this. We can pretty much get it right there. Now, a lot of people are saying they like the cooler, warm, warm, cool. Well, it's always one of these, which is right, just ask everybody. So we could go cool here or we could go warm there. I've got an idea. Why don't we split the difference? We're going to grab our adjustment brush here. And now you're going to click here, all the options. People wonder sometimes in the new Camera Raw, where are the options? They're under these little arrows. And we've got Auto Mask turned on. I'm going to grab my Wacom pen. Pen pressure doesn't really do anything in here, but it's just easier to work with a pen than it is with a mouse. So we're going to turn Auto Mask on, and I'm just going to paint over here. You don't see anything happening right now, and that's because we also have turned on Reset Sliders automatically, which I like. So this way I can just turn on mask options, and I can see where I'm painting. Of course, I'm painting white. It's hard to see it against that cloud, against that background there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go under here and we're going to click this and choose a color instead. So why don't we go in here, we're going to grab a yellow. Click there. All right, so we're going to do that. And let's go down there. And don't worry, Jill, don't worry, Jill. We are going to fix that. So what we're doing now is we're making a selection around here. And now we're selecting this area. Notice how it's doing a pretty good job. I don't have to get all the way into the wingtips, just as long as I keep that inner circle inside the whole image there. Alright, so we're just making a selection around our eagle. Great! Now we can turn off our mask options. So the nice thing is, now that we've set this, we can just open up the exposure here inside of our masked area. So now that means when I go back to my overall images, I can pull the shadows back. See that? And now we can work on that area independently. So if we grab our brush here, click on that point there, see that? Make sure it's selected. And now we've got control separately right there. So why don't we open that up a little bit? And let's just play around. Give the whites a little bit of a boost. And we're just kind of playing around here. And one of the things that might look good with this is texture. Let's hit that texture quite hard. Notice I'm not pushing the clarity. I like the texture a lot better. And one of the things that's nice about this is we could adjust the color temperature if we wanted to stylize this a little bit. We could warm it here. See this? You can change it just on that eagle. So maybe we're going to warm it up just a little bit more than we want. And the reason for that is because now when I go back, now I can go in here and I can cool it. So now we're going to get those cool clouds with a warmer eagle. So that's kind of one way to do it there. And then if we go here and we look at this before and after, there we go there. And that's a really nice carving. I wonder who did that. That's really beautiful. And we see we got a little bit of noise there when we zoom in. So why don't we fix that? What we're going to do is just go down to the detail. And under the detail, we can just go in and just do a little bit of noise reduction. And that will get rid of it. Alright, so there we go. There's our before and there's our after. So that's one way. And you know what? It's something I don't go crazy with vignettes all the time, but I feel like this is one of those shots that really could work nicely with a vignette. And also cropping. I might want to crop this a little bit more centered. And by the way, let's hit here. Let's turn that on right there. It's looking pretty good. And so we're going to just kind of center that a little bit more. And then we could also go down to our effects here. and we could take our vignette and just kind of pull it down. Now the options are under the arrow, as always, so let's take that midpoint a little bit further so we're not actually getting into our image. Let's pull it out a little bit, give it a little bit more feather, and so we can do that vignette. So we're just kind of drawing the attention or drawing the eye into our eagle right there. All right. On this image, what type of metering would you use on the camera? Ray, good question. I would be metering, of course, for behind here. I'd be metering for the clouds because I would want to make sure that I'm getting the detail there. Probably wouldn't be using spot because that's probably a little too much. What I would probably do is I'd probably just go at a matrix, and then I wouldn't point it at the eagle yet. I would point it at the clouds, just move the camera a little to the side so you're just shooting a clean sky, and then just hold down your exposure lock and then bring it in and boom, and get that shot. The other thing, you could also bracket, but I don't think you need to bracket for this. It'd be fine. So that's good job there, Rod Shelley. Let's see what else we've got as far as other photos that we might want to play around with. So you can see these are all your guys' photos. Thank you for submitting them. And once again, fearlesscafe.com is the place that you can go and you can submit your own photos if you want your photos to be included with this Fix My Photo. So look at this. We've got all kinds of different shots here. I like this Taj Mahal maybe. Let's see what else we've got though. Maybe this one here. This is a nice scene. What do you guys think? Let me just quickly check the questions there. A multi-exposure HDR, Randy was asking. We did one last week where we did an exposure blending shot for Fix My Photo, but maybe we can consider doing a section on HDR. Maybe next week we can do an HDR image where we can do that. All right, so why don't we open up Henry's shot? So I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to open it in Camera Raw. This is a TIFF file. And right now I can see there's some clipping in the highlights. That's why that's red. And these are the highlight and shadow clipping right there. All right, so we've got this neat little church here by a lake. I really like this. Nice shot. Good job, Henry. All right, so let's go and we're going to look into our basics. The first thing though I might do though is see these little branches here. I think they're a little bit of a distraction, so we might get rid of those. So why don't we grab the spot removal tool, and then we're just going to paint these out. See what I'm doing? I'm just painting over them, and then it's just going to get rid of them there. And that's it to heal. You could also use them for clone if you wanted, but heal works quite well, and that's our default settings. All right, great. So now we've got that. Let's click here. We've cleaned that up. So I want to, do some of the overall tones. I feel like it's a little bit bright here. And that's clipping. So we can recover these highlights. And I'm going to take the highlight slider all the way up. And I'm going to take the exposure down a little bit. Now, somebody in here mentioned, who was it? Jill made a very good point. And it's something that I talk about a lot, is that shadows. You don't want to go all the way up with the shadows because it'll make it look artificial. It's nice to recover it a little bit, but be careful with that. However, with the highlights, you can get quite aggressive with the highlight recovery, and the image is still going to look very natural. Now, of course, if you're going for a stylistic effect and you want to go here and you want to push the shadows and you want to push your clarity because you're going for that effect, by all means, go ahead and do it. Not really the way I like to work, not these days. So anyway. All right, so now we're just recovering a little bit of detail. We can see we've got a little bit of sky coming in there. This might even be a good place to do another sky replacement. We did one last week. But let's have a look. I'm going to take the temperature here. We could warm up that temperature and see how we can really change the feel of that. Or we can make it a cool kind of a moody morning. Or we can mix them, as we've done before. where we start to just kind of change that light and paint in with that. Let's just play around a little bit. Let's get the exposure down. And I want to reduce the blacks because I still feel like this has too much in the shadow. I'm also going to reduce the contrast a little bit. There we go. Sometimes the cameras add contrast, and so does Camera Raw. And you see, like here, I just felt like it was too much contrast. And so by pulling that down, it just kind of opens up some of the detail in some of those areas, because when you get too much contrast, it compresses the shadow and highlight detail, where you don't really see a lot of detail in those shadow highlight areas, and it just kind of pushes everything too dense, if you guys know what I mean. And just by reducing that, we can reduce that density and just kind of open up the photograph a little bit. So let's have a look here, and what we're going to do is maybe just give it a little texture. Now this photo really doesn't need a lot of work. I think it's looking nice. I'm going to give it a little bit of vibrance here, and I'm going to reduce the saturation. So we can just kind of do that, which is an interesting effect, because if you look at this, let me talk about this for a second. So vibrance and saturation are different. If I turn up saturation, see what it does is it just boosts the color everywhere. If I pull it down, it takes away the color everywhere. So we get black and white, and now I'm looking at it and thinking this might be a good black and white too. Now vibrance, if we increase vibrance, what it does is look at those areas that are not so saturated, such as up here. Notice how it's adding more saturation there, but it's not moving so fast in areas such as the tree and the grass. So the areas that are already saturated get less of a push than the areas that are not. And same thing if we go the other way. Notice what happens. Those saturated colors will hold on to their color much longer than the other areas. So if you're going for different types of special effects or different things like that, that can be useful. But one of the things I like to do sometimes is just reduce the saturation a little and then increase the vibrance. So what I'm allowing it to do is because I felt like the color, everything felt just a little too compressed on the image as far as detail and color. So by pulling back the saturation, reduces it everywhere, but then increasing the vibrance, it takes those unsaturated colors and boosts those a little bit without overdoing things like the tree and the grass. In fact, I could go even higher here, where the tree and the grass is looking natural, but see how we're getting more vibrance now in the colors of the hills and in the reflections in some different places than we normally would. So if we look at this before and after, you can see the changes I've been making before and after are not a lot. I feel like this image, that's what I wanted to do. I really just wanted to desaturate that contrast, push that contrast back a little bit, and just kind of even out the colors a little bit. Now we could warm it up just a tad if we wanted now. And if we look at this before and after, see how it's a subtle move? But if you look in here, look into the reflections and see how we're seeing more, I think it's a little bit more of an inviting image. And this is Henry, I don't know, is Henry here? Our raw files allowed? Oh, absolutely. Please include raw files if you can. Photomaker, could the church image be warmed up a bit? Yes. Could you copy the cloud reflection to the sky? I think you'd be better off to try and find another sky. We could try and do that, but the problem with this is we've got the ripples in there, so it's probably not going to work. You could use a brush, of course, kind of a cloud brush to kind of add that. There's different things we could do. Why don't we open it right now inside of Photoshop? Okay, here we are inside of Photoshop, and here's the image. So we got some good suggestions there from you guys. So why don't we try something with some light? Let's just go for fun. Let's go in here, and we're going to grab a curves adjustment layer. And what I'm going to do with this curves adjustment is I'm going to punch this up. And don't worry, we're not going to put this across the whole image. And we're going to take the blues, because we want to make it warm, like a yellow. So we're going to take the blues, and we're going to reduce the blues and the highlights. And see what that does is it allows the yellows to show through, because yellow is the opposite of blue. And then we're going to go into our reds, and we're going to boost those a little bit in the shadow area, just to kind of give us that golden kind of look. All right, so now if we look at this is overexposed, but it's kind of giving us, see that? Like almost like a sunny kind of a look. So what we want to do is we're going to hide everything on this photo by inverting the mask. So if we hit Control I, that hides that mask now, where everything in that mask now is hidden because it's black. Now if we paint with white, we can start to add some areas of light. So why don't we hit the X key? We're going to grab a brush here, and I'm going to drop the opacity down to about 10%. Now if you hit the 1 key, it'll change it to 10%. If you hit the 5 key, it'll make it 50%. The 0 key will be 100. Well, how do you get 0? Double 0 will get us to there. I guess it doesn't do that anymore. That's fine. And you can type 0, 1. You could do 15 if you type fast. See, like I'm putting an exact number in by typing quickly. Or just tap with the 1 and you'll get that key. So 10, 20... So that's the 2 key is a 20%. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty good. All right, so let's pull this brush down a little bit, painting onto this mask. And if we did want to hit that with a little light here, see what we could do? We could start to just kind of do that. And it could kind of hit there. And you could start to paint in some light if you wanted. You know, if you wanted a little bit of light hitting over here, see how we could do that? So why don't we undo that? I've got an idea. I'm just going to fill this with black just to reset it. Maybe we're going to have the light coming in. Let's have a look and see if we can figure out where the shadows are in the image. With the overhead, it's a little bit harder to tell with the overcast image. So what we're looking for is shadows. Okay, we see we've got some people here. We've got some shadows coming down there. I can see those shadows are underneath him. So what we're looking for is a telltale sign of where our shadows are. See what we're doing? We're looking at this image. I can see that the light is coming from above, obviously. I can see around here. There's not a lot of light in this scene, so we could kind of do our own thing with it, because I think it's mostly coming from above. So let's grab our brush here. And so we could say, hey, let's have a little patch of sunlight just hitting this area here. So, you know, like the clouds, sometimes you get a little cloud shadow. And you want a little bit of that light hitting there. Look at this. You just paint that in. And that's the nice thing about using a low opacity. You know, if we wanted a little bit of light just hitting here, we could. In fact, why don't I set some directional light? So I'm just going to get rid of this. And I could just fill it with black, but I'll just do it this way quickly. Alright, so we're going to have some directional light coming from that side, coming from the right side. So we want some light just kind of hitting up here. Let's see what we're doing. We're just kind of blending it in. And it would be just hitting the face of this. See that? Just that side of those trees here, which are facing the light. So we've got light coming from here. That's what we're going to do. And so we're going to have that just kind of hitting there. And this would be in shadow, except for maybe just a little bit exposed here. Let's just give that a little touch. There we go. Little light there. And see what we're doing now, we're starting to shape this a little bit. Now for this roof might be a good place to make a selection, so why don't we just grab our object selection tool and see how well this works on the roof. Let's just make a selection around it. There we go, see how it selected it really nicely. Grab the brush, and now we can paint this roof, so this roof is getting some light. There we go. So let's give it quite a bit of light hitting that roof. Great. Let's grab the object selection tool again, and this time we're going to grab around here the face. Now the object selection tool is really amazing, and it works in 2 modes, rectangle or lasso. So we're in the lasso mode here, and I'm just going to see what I'm doing. I'm hitting the Alt or the Option key to take away from the areas I don't want to select. And so you can very quickly just select these areas. Now these selections don't have to be perfect because we're just using them for just dodging and burning essentially, or just painting. So we can get those rough selections, and it just kind of keeps things where we want them. And now if we wanted, we could go in here. Let me hit the X key. And what I might do is see these areas in here. You probably want to keep some shadow in there. So you might use a smaller brush, boost our opacity to about 60%. And let's make these brushes quite small, and then you might just paint in here. So what I'm doing now is I'm painting away that adjustment again. In fact, I'm just going to go up to 0 for 100%. And see what I'm doing? I'm just painting back those shadows in there into those areas. See that? They're just going back in there because they wouldn't be getting sunlight directly hitting those areas. And then you can just kind of do stuff like that. And let's have a look and see what that little bit of painting with light did. Yeah, before and after. And if you feel like it's too much, you can change the blending mode into something like a soft light or a hard light. And let's see what that looks like in a soft light. It's very subtle now. So, you know, we can do things like that. So anyway, guys, I want to encourage you to submit some of your photos for Fix My Photo, because I'd love to work on your guys' photos here. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some quick questions and answers here. And how would you replace the sky when it's reflected in the water? What I would do is I would replace that sky by just finding a very similar sky. You just, like I said last week, we did a sky replacement. One of the things I do is I constantly shoot skies. When I'm traveling or when I'm home, when I've got my camera, I shoot skies all the time. So you should have a bunch of, you know, kind of cloudy skies, overcast skies, and just start shooting those different skies. And honestly, there's so many skies you could use that would just match this very, very easily. It wouldn't be a difficult one. And don't forget, you can also reduce the opacity. So if your sky is a little too much, you can change the color, you can reduce the opacity, you can blend it in. It's not that difficult. And as I showed last week, if you guys remember, we can go in here and go into Adobe Stock. Let me just grab some water. And we can type in sky. And we could find different types of skies here inside of Adobe Stock. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And let's see what happens if we do overcast. Yeah, so now we've got overcast skies in here. And, you know, it wouldn't be too difficult to find something that we could use that would match what we're doing there, as you can see there. Just going through here. And if you wanted to make the sky a little more dramatic, you could do that as well. Just make sure you do the same thing for the reflections there. And nobody is going to be sitting here analyzing each puff of the cloud and checking up there to say, hey, is that exactly the same? Well, in fact, some of these areas here behind the church, see that area there? This area here. You know, if we were to look at it up there, you know, notice that the angle's a little different, so we would be kind of matching it up there somewhere. But, you know, no one's going to be checking this. And also, if you look at this, see how this ends at the top there? It's not there. So this area, to be honest, this area of cloud would be up here somewhere. It wouldn't even be seen in the scene, so you don't have to worry about matching it perfectly. Have I done a tutorial on matching, organizing in Bridge? I have not. But that's a good suggestion. All right, guys, so what are we going to do at this point here is I'm going to take a bunch of questions and answers, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the official live stream, you know, as far as like the lesson part. And then, so like, you know, if you don't mind hitting that like button, if you liked this, it also helps us, you know, with the algorithm. And if you haven't subscribed, go in there and hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and then you'll know when we upload a new video. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go out of here. We're going to end out of this right now. And then we are going to do our live questions and answers right now.